All right, guys, welcome back to this episode of the Hammer and Chisel Performance Podcast. I'm your host, John Heck, going to hit it off with another episode of the Q&A. Again, send in your questions on Instagram on Fridays, and they'll be answered here at length on the pod, dropping on Sunday mornings every week. Now, I am going to try my best to get to all the questions. If your question is not addressed here, it's possible this same question or topic was covered at length in a recent episode of the podcast, or maybe your question didn't quite give me enough context to go on. But for the most part, I should be able to hit most of these questions you guys are sending in, and I got a bunch of good ones this week. So what to expect in the podcast coming up on Tuesday, going to be dropping my episode with Ed Cohn, the GOAT, greatest powerlifter of all time. That's going to be a good one. So tune in for that, Spotify and YouTube. But let's go ahead and dive into the questions. All right, number one, are you currently taking on one-on-one coaching clients? I'm potentially interested. If so, what separates you from other coaches? Okay, well, good question. First and foremost, yes, I am currently taking on clients. I am in my third month of business doing this at full-time capacity, so I've still got quite a bit of bandwidth to take on more people. I've been, running a coaching service for the last 5 years now. But during that entire time, it's been while, a part-time capacity while working full-time in football strength and conditioning. So, I'd only worked with a handful of, select individuals. But now that I've stepped away from football, this is my 100% full-time job. So obviously I'm able to work with a lot more people and have a lot more time and ability and bandwidth to give a much more in-depth, true, comprehensive, one-on-one coaching relationship with everyone I work with. And that's what I love doing. As far as what separates me, well, I can't speak to other coaches out there, and I won't speak ill of anyone else out there. But as far as myself, I bring a wide diversity of experience and years of legitimate coaching experience, not just online coaching, but I've spent the last 9 years working in Division I strength and conditioning and working in NFL strength and conditioning, while simultaneously working and coaching with powerlifters, bodybuilders, strongman competitors, general population of all varieties, and then myself playing football at University of North Carolina, competing in powerlifting and strongman and bodybuilding, and going through all of these things. I've got a degree from the University of North Carolina in exercise physiology and a minor in sports nutrition. I'm a certified nutritionist and strength coach, and I've been working at that capacity in a high level for nearly a decade now. So I bring a wealth of knowledge, experience to the table with this. But then more importantly, this is what I'm passionate about. This is what I love doing. I've dedicated my entire life to coaching. And, regarding other coaches out there, not naming anyone specifically, but I think there are a lot of coaches who, maybe they like programming and putting down, a training plan on an Excel spreadsheet. But I like dealing with human beings. I want to have a one-on-one relationship, get to know everyone I'm working with, understand everyone, and just truly coach them through every point that, every adjustment that we're making with the diet, explain the why behind things, make sure that, everyone's bought in and knows that I care and that I'm giving them my full undivided attention and giving everyone my all. So, just bringing a lot of knowledge, experience, and just a lot of passion and undivided effort to what I'm doing. So if you're interested, shoot me a DM. We can chat and see if we're a good fit and go from there. All right, moving on. Advice for someone that is very food focused. Okay, so food focus, this is a common thing. If you're dieting, you get hungry, you've got cravings, and you start thinking about food all the time. Like personally, when I'm dieting down and getting really lean, I'm thinking about food 24/7. I find myself going on YouTube and watching food videos online, looking up websites for where I might have my cheat meal, looking at menus online. on Instagram food accounts. Don't do that. If you want to avoid some of the food focus, number one, put the goal in the driver's seat. And that's one thing that for me, I've been fortunate with is that although I do get food cravings bad and I think about food a lot when I'm dieting, I get very hungry and it's a challenge. But at the end of the day, the discomfort of being hungry and the cravings is tiny compared to the disappointment I would have going off plan and setting myself back. I get so locked in on a goal. It's important to me. I care about it. I'm working hard for it. I'm motivated to get to the goal. And no amount of hunger or food focus is going to get in the way of that. So, I put the goal in front, like just focus on why are you doing this? What is the end goal? Reflect on the fact that you're putting in a lot of hard work and don't set yourself back by giving in to, some mouth pleasure that you're going to have for a matter of seconds. Then boom, the food's done. And now you've undone potentially a week of hard work. So there's that. But then from more of a practical standpoint, I don't do what I do. Like try to avoid indulging yourself with the visuals and watching food videos and on Instagram food channels. Like unfollow all those accounts. Like don't go to those YouTube channels. Don't go on the Food Network on TV. Don't focus on what other people are eating around you. Don't wander through the aisles of the grocery store in sections that you can't eat the food. Like don't indulge in the sort of pleasure of looking and thinking about it, which is easy to do. And then another thing you can do when you're dieting is, as bad as it sounds, like purposely try to make your food a little bit blander. Like if you're going out of your way to make your food taste really good, and your focus on the taste and the pleasure feedback that food brings, you're constantly going to be thinking about it. Whereas if you just kind of stick to bland chicken and rice and just kind of treat it a little bit robotically during that time, I find that it's less stimulating to cravings. Like if you're not totally looking forward to this amazing dish you're about to cook and eat, it's more just like whatever. It's just my baked potato and my lean steak and my broccoli. You're still going to enjoy it. It's going to be good quality food, but it's not going to be triggering all of these thoughts and cravings. So those are some suggestions there. Okay, next question. What's your take on carb refeeds during a cutting phase? So I made a post about this on Instagram the other day. I'm generally in favor of them. I think there's a legitimate merit to utilizing strategic refeeds where we are focused on carbohydrates and low fat, mainly because this is going to help us avoid metabolic downregulation, right? As we get into a diet and we are in a calorie deficit for an extended period of time, we're losing body fat, we're eating less food, your body is sensing we are starving, right? Your body doesn't know that, oh, you're just dieting and this is a controlled situation. No, it thinks you're literally starving. And as a survival defense mechanism, it is going to start slowing down your metabolism. So your body is burning fewer calories, burning fewer of its resources because your body thinks, hey, we might have to survive through a long, cold winter. Like we need some of this body fat and insulation. We can't just wither away and starve. But you can sort of offset this by if once a week or once every 2 weeks or whatever it is, and I'll get into that in a second, you eat in a calorie surplus, a controlled surplus, you send that signal to your body that food is not scarce, that we're not starving. And that's going to help offset or slow down, hold off some of that metabolic downregulation. It's going to keep metabolism higher. And it's going to allow us to effectively burn more calories for an extended period of time and keep the diet going and effective longer. It's going to help with muscle retention by having that day where you've got a surplus, you're kind of filling out those glycogen stores. You're probably going to have a better training day that day and the next couple days because your glycogen stores will be fuller and that'll kind of hold up for a few more days, while the glycogen is being burned. So I'm in favor of utilizing the refeeds, but it's individual. The extent of the refeed, it's going to depend on, how big is the individual, how much muscle mass do they carry, what is their metabolic capability right now, how lean are they. A guy who is advanced, let's say an advanced bodybuilder who's very lean, carries a ton of muscle tissue, has been eating a ton of food for years and years and years. Well, their body's going to be a food burning machine. So that individual is probably going to get a very big refeed. Like, for example, for me, an adequate carbohydrate refeed is probably going to be like 1,200 grams of carbs. And that is not the case for everyone. That will not be beneficial for the majority of humans. I'm 6'7", 325 pounds. I carry, a lot of muscle mass. I'm very lean, and I've progressively built up my metabolic capabilities over the course of years and years and years of dieting like a bodybuilder and training like a bodybuilder and a powerlifter and a strongman competitor. So for smaller, less advanced individuals, the refeed is going to be smaller. And then what I like to do to determine, how do we adjust the refeed from there? How frequently do we use the refeed is give someone the refeed, and then monitor their body response over the course of the next 7 days. Usually you'll do a refeed, you'll see a spike up in body weight as your body holds more glycogen, holds more water. And then you'll see that weight kind of start falling off. And I'm going to look at how many days does it take for their body weight to return back to baseline? How many days does it take their body weight to hit a new body weight low? Do we hit a new body weight low? And then kind of based on my assessment of what your body does over the course of the days post refeed, that gives me data on how frequently to refeed, and the magnitude of the refeed. And that's just kind of where the art of coaching comes in. And that's kind of a process I've honed in over the years. And it's very individualized. So, okay, next question. People get caught up with wanting the strength, but also want to lean out. What's your response to people who think like that? Yeah, so I like putting the year into phases, and each phase has a priority. Now, during each phase, and the priorities are typically going to be body composition, either losing fat, adding muscle, strength, performance, gut health, digestion. These are all variables that need to be focused on. But in each phase of the year, one or two of those variables is going to be a priority. It doesn't mean the other variables are going to be just out of the picture, but the plan is not going to be centered around optimizing all the variables. We're going to kind of focus on one. So, for example, we'll have a fat loss phase where the number one goal is losing body fat and retaining muscle tissue. There will be a growth phase where the number one goal is gaining muscle tissue, keeping digestion in a good place. And then, some secondary goals are making sure we're not adding too much fat too quickly, things like that. A secondary goal during the fat loss phase is, the hitting big PRs in training. It's like during a fat loss phase, we want to approach training with the intent to get stronger. Absolutely. That's a key philosophy, in my opinion, for a successful cut, is attack your training with the intent to get stronger. And for most of a diet, you will be able to, like your first couple months of a diet, it's not like you're going to be so depleted and dieted down that you can't have good output with lifting weights. Lifting weights is not that calorically and carbohydrate demanding as people think, right? We're not running marathons. We're not playing a 3-hour football game. We're in the gym for an hour or so lifting weights. So for the first half of a diet, your strength, you can still make strength gains, but of course you'll get to a point where being in a calorie deficit and having been dieted down is not going to be optimal for being at your strongest. So what I'd say to these people is, like, it's a good mindset to have to push to get stronger in training and to attack their training with an intent to get stronger while leaning out. And for a large part of that time, they probably will be able to. But just understanding that there's going to come a point in the diet where it's like, okay, we're probably not setting PRs in training anymore. We're probably not, just making huge gains in the weight room. There'll probably come a point where now we're more hoping to just maintain strength and output in the weight room. So that's what I would say to someone. Okay, let's see. Moving on. What's the reason behind a period of maintenance between bulk and cut? Okay, so good question. A mistake people make is they go into a gain phase, they add a bunch of size, and then they just immediately go right back into a calorie deficit and diet it all off. So your body, it wants to fight change. Your body wants to stay in a state of homeostasis. It wants to stay in a place of, it doesn't want to be growing and cutting and yo-yoing up and down. So when you go through, a 12 or 16 week phase of a calorie surplus, you get to the end of that. And in my opinion, we spend this time growing. Now we need to have a period of time where we make this size we added, we need to make it permanent now. If we just go back into a deficit, you're going to lose most of that size you just gained. Like I said, your body wants to just snap back to its normal. We've got to make sure the new muscle, the new size, it sticks around. So in the maintenance phase, it is a maintenance phase calorically. It is a maintenance phase in the sense that, okay, we are no longer in a surplus. We are no longer pushing to gain additional size. However, it is not a maintenance phase from a training standpoint. This is now the time where, okay, we've added all this size. We're not trying to add any more size necessarily. We're not pushing the food to add more scale weight. But now we got to take all that size we just added and make it strong. The best way to make added size stick around is place a demand on the new size that sends a signal, hey, we need all this new muscle tissue. We need it to stay around. So if you gain, 20, 30 pounds, whatever, during your growth phase, take a period of time, 6-8 weeks where you get as strong as possible in training while holding that peak size. Reduce your calories down to maintenance, try to maintain that weight. You might drop a little bit, but get as strong as you possibly can. And now you're giving all that new muscle a reason to stick around long term, and you're going to set yourself up to diet down and hold on to all of that tissue once you enter the deficit again. Okay, good question there. Next question. Are you going to come out with general strength programs, powerlifting and strongman? Yes. So my website, hammerchiselperformance.com, is almost complete. It's been a work in progress here. It's the last couple months. It's been hectic, transitioning away from football and onboarding a lot of new clients, getting a business off the ground, having a newborn baby at home, figuring out a move. My wife and I are moving back to North Carolina in a month. So with all that, the website has been a slow process, but we are shooting to have it launch in the first week of March. It's fantastic. So all of my coaching services will be available on the website. I have an ebook that I've put a lot of time and effort into writing that is going to be launched on the website. And then I have 3 programs that are written and ready to roll that will be for sale on the website. There's going to be a strongman program. There's going to be a powerlifting program. And then there's an athletic development program. The athletic development program being basically an all-encompassing, off season that I would program for a football player or a team sport athlete. So it's going to be the weight room and the field work. So it's going to be, explosive work in the weight room, strength and hypertrophy, just head to toe, holistic strength work, the same way I would train an off-season athlete. And then all the field work, working on acceleration, change of direction, conditioning, max velocity, all of those things. So anyway, those 3 programs and an ebook will be available on my website, which is coming out here very soon. And that'll all be, announced on social media and the podcast and all that once it's out. But and then over the course of the year, I'll be continuing to add more programs. I've got several in the works right now. So stay tuned for that. Let's see here. What's the easiest way to incorporate foods that improve gut health? Okay. I really like using some fermented foods in your diet. So fermented foods that contain live, active probiotics. So kimchi is a great one. Sauerkraut is a great one. And then you've got things like kefir, kombucha, Greek yogurt. Now, I will say your typical store-bought Greek yogurt, it has the live bacteria cultures are like added in after the yogurt's been made and pasteurized. So it's not really an authentic, true fermented food compared to like if you made a true homemade Greek yogurt. But still, a solid addition. But things like kimchi and sauerkraut are legit fermented foods. I've never seen any version of like a pasteurized kimchi, but you will occasionally see a pasteurized sauerkraut, which is no good. Pasteurized means it's been heated and bacteria has been killed. We want those good bacteria. So if you're using a sauerkraut, make sure it is a fermented, non-pasteurized sauerkraut. I like adding in, when I'm dieting, or for most of my year, I'll have a serving of kimchi and a serving of sauerkraut daily. Greek yogurt is always in my diet. So those are some good, easy additions right there. All right, moving on. What is your opinion on training frequency and how often you should train a muscle? So for hypertrophy purposes, I would hit each muscle group twice a week. And even for strength work, that's generally what I do. With hypertrophy, frequency has been shown to be a major factor in optimizing hypertrophy outcomes. Now, obviously, you need to make sure your volume is appropriate. You can't just be having these massive high volume sessions per muscle group and then do that multiple times a week. You want to be hitting 3 to 5 working sets close to failure per muscle group, and then do that twice a week per muscle group. That's usually going to be optimal for a total of about 6 to 10 working sets per week per muscle group, again, divided up into 2 sessions. Now, for strength, this can be a little bit more nuanced. With strength, you've got to consider the fact that, okay, there's skill work, right? We're not looking at it as a muscle that we're training. We're looking at training a movement. We're looking at, for hypertrophy focus, we're like thinking about, hey, we're building our quads, we're building our hamstrings. For a powerlifter, we're thinking about building a squat, right? And that's different. So considerations with frequency change when the goals are performance-based. For very strong lifters, they might only be able to deadlift once every 2 weeks or so, right? Because a single deadlift session at the loads that they're handling is going to be so taxing to their system that to do that multiple times a week, even just every week, would just crush their central nervous system or just put them physically at risk, their spine, their joints, soft tissue, whatever. So anyway, point is, hypertrophy, ideally hit every muscle group twice a week. For strength, it gets a little more nuanced and context dependent. Okay. Any advice for a powerlifter / strongman returning to training after pregnancy and giving birth? That's a good question. And I don't want to get too far out of my lane here. I'll admit this is not a huge area of expertise for me. And I have to imagine, it's kind of, there will be some considerations. Was it a C-section? Was it a vaginal birth? And we have an 8-week-old baby, so my wife had a C-section, and obviously there's it's an open surgery, so there were some major restrictions for her as far as how long she has to wait before she can return to exercise and things like that. And then I imagine returning to powerlifting and strongman would be kind of a whole beast in and of itself. Now, as far as traditional birth, I'm not super well versed on what the restrictions are. So just speaking in general terms for addressing somebody who is returning to training after a layoff. Let's take pregnancy out of the equation and just say somebody returning to training after an extended hiatus. I would definitely go through a ramp up phase. Don't just jump back into the same kind of volume and intensity you were doing when you were, previously when you were in your training routine. Ramp up, start easy. If you're normally doing 3 or 4 working sets per exercise, start with just 2. Leave reps in the tank. Like, just come in, move around, just reacclimate yourself to the movements. Don't worry about going heavy. Don't worry about pushing anywhere near failure. Just take yourself through the motions of all the exercises. Get 50% or so of the volume you might normally do. You're probably still going to be sore from that. And then just every week, gradually ramp up that volume, gradually ramp up the intensity. And I would build up, I would ramp up over the course of a month. So weeks 1, 2, and 3 are kind of escalating. And then by week 4, you're kind of right there back in the swing of things. So good question. What are your opinions on BPC 157 and other similar products for helping post-injury? So I've heard mixed things, and I have used BPC 157 myself with my own experiences with observing other people, researching it heavily. It seems to be a pretty well-established, legitimate, worthwhile addition. If you're coming off of an injury or if you had a surgery, it can be a legitimately helpful healing tool in accelerating a recovery process from injury. So, for example, myself, I had a gallbladder removal, which is obviously an abdominal surgery, and I utilized injectable BPC 157. I used it subcutaneously around all of the incision sites. I would take it twice a day, morning and PM. I can't remember the exact dose. I'm not going to share dosages here, but I ran that for, I want to say it was 30 days. And I had a great recovery process. I was back to training hard and heavy well before the doctors had predicted. So in my opinion, it played a significant role in accelerating that recovery from surgery. I have known many people who have had, muscle tears, significant operations, and they utilized BPC 157 and their recovery process was accelerated. For gut issues, oral BPC 157 has been shown to be highly effective. Now, the kind of mixed reviews, things where the jury is a little bit out. It's kind of what types of injuries that it might help with versus might not be as effective with. If we're talking about a bone, fractures, things like that, versus tearing a ligament versus a muscle injury. My suspicion and what it seems like is that BPC 157 is not going to just be some miracle cure-all that's going to solve any and all issues, and it's going to just take the injury or situation that has a terrible outlook and just completely reverse course and be this miracle cure. It's not like that. It's just kind of, hey, you have a soft tissue injury. This can probably help accelerate the process. So that's kind of my view on it. What's your shoe size? I'm a size 16. Thanks for asking. Okay, how should training differ during in-season versus off-season in terms of volume and difficulty of it all? So in the off-season, this is building season. This is where we're going to have the highest volume, highest intensity, and training is in the driver's seat. Training is the focus, whereas in season, training takes a back seat, right? The sports practice and sports competition is the priority and the main focus. However, this does not mean that we just completely scale back in the weight room. My advice would be decrease the volume in training. Opt for, you're probably going to have a lower training frequency. For example, if you're training 4 or 5 days per week in the off season, you're probably going to be training, 3, maybe even 2 days in season. But we've got a saying, small doses of excellence. Get some great high quality work within those sessions. You're probably going to reduce the volume, but you can keep intensity somewhat higher. It's not to say we're going to be maxing out or training to failure or things like that, but still touching on some heavy loads at lower volumes, maybe touching on some explosive work, some dynamic effort type work, keeping neural output high. You can still get some great quality training sessions, just probably with a reduced frequency, reduced volume, and then session duration is probably going to be shorter. For football, typically in the off season, our training sessions are, hour and a half long, whereas in season, they're probably more like 45 minutes long. So those are some of the differences there. What is your caloric intake when bulking, when cutting? So personally, I utilize a carb cycling protocol. I do my own diet programming. Right now and honestly, I don't really have the calories calculated. I just go by a meal plan that I write for myself and macros. So for example, on a high carb day, I'm eating almost 1,200 grams of carbs, about 330 grams of protein, and then fat is very low. It's probably like a total of 30 grams or less of fat on the day. So you can do some of the calorie math there. Whereas when I'm cutting, I mean, it's reduced. On a typical baseline day in a diet, let's say, midpoint of the diet, I'm still probably eating 500 grams of carbs or so on a typical day and 350 to 400 grams of protein potentially. I increased my protein intake when I'm in a deficit, and then fats are going to still be low. There's probably, 50 grams or so total a day. So again, you can do the calorie math on that, but a lot of food, whether I'm bulking or cutting at this point, food is very high for me. Okay. Let's see. Next question. Have you ever considered high school strength and conditioning, or what have you heard about the high school level? Personally, no. There are some great jobs in strength and conditioning at the high school level these days, especially if you go to, a bigger program. Like there's programs in Texas that are practically collegiate programs, and there's strength coaches at that level making good money. So nothing wrong with being a strength and conditioning coach at the high school level. I got started in college and have spent time in the NFL. And, I prefer working with some of the older, more, mature guys. And, if you're working at the high school level, you probably also have to teach a class there, probably coach other sports and things like that, which wasn't something I really wanted to do. So it's not something I considered, but for a strength and conditioning coach, you can absolutely find a solid job doing that. Okay, you and Justin talked about building your metabolism. What are the fundamentals of that? So basically, the fundamentals of it are sort of the same way you might look at a progressive overload approach to training. You look at someone who's new to training and you start, relatively simple in terms of it's not a ton of volume, it's not a ton of weight, but over time, you're increasing some volume, you're putting more weight on the bar, You're putting more weight on the bar over time. Their body adapts, gets stronger. We add more weight. They adapt, get stronger. We add more weight. And you're doing it in a controlled, incremental fashion. It's the same thing with building metabolism. It's essentially a progressive overload approach to eating. And it's done so over the course of years, but basically you diet down, get really lean, which sets you up for a growth phase. And then within that growth phase, we were eating, in a surplus, eating a lot of food. And then once we get to kind of peak size, we maintain it. And then we've built up our capability of eating more and more and more food over the course of the growth period. The purpose of the growth period, sometimes it's less about truly adding size and it's more about turning your body into a food processing machine. So let's say we end the diet at 2,000 calories. Well, geez, we want to try to build it up to, we end the growth period at 3,000, 3,200, maybe 3,500 calories. And then we go into the next diet eating about 3,200 calories. And then we can probably diet down to where we finish the diet now at 2,300 calories or 2,500 calories compared to the last go around. We finished the diet at 2,000 calories. So now we brought up the metabolic capability. Now we're ending the diet at 500 calories more than the last time. And then we repeat the process. We go through another growth phase. We ended the growth phase last time at 3,500 calories. Now we end this one. We build all the way up to 4,000 calories. We diet down again and we finish this diet at 2,750 calories and repeat over and over. Build it growing, maintaining, diet down. End at a heavier body weight than you did last time. Grow, maintain, diet, and you're adding muscle over the course of this time. As you add muscle, your metabolism increases. You're able to eat more food. Then you grow. You build up your body to where you're handling and eating more food than the last time. Then you diet. Now you're dieting on more food than you dieted the last time. And it's just this progressive process where you're adding muscle and you're over time training your body to eat more and more food without getting fat. And over time, you build up a metabolism that way. And oftentimes, when you're working with someone for the first time, before you can successfully really attempt a diet, you need to build up their metabolism. A lot of people, they get into their adult life and, they stop training or just they eat completely sporadically and they just don't eat a ton of food. And, they'll eat two meals during the week and binge on the weekends and severely undereat protein, overeat fat, and their metabolism just kind of down regulates and gets slow and sluggish, and maybe they're added kind of a chubby body fat percentage, but they're only eating like 2,300 calories a day, and that doesn't give you much room to pull food out from to create a calorie deficit. So rather than just trying to diet down on starvation calories and then you just plateau, but they're still not lean, sometimes the better move is start by building up the metabolism on the front end, increase the amount of food they're eating and hold that for an extended period of time, train their body to be able to eat some more food, which will then set us up for a fat loss phase where they're now in position to diet on more calories. And that way we can successfully burn more body fat without starving them to a point where they're just going to lose muscle. And it sets us up for a better outcome. So, it's there's an art to it. There's a science to it. But it's just train yourself to eat more, build muscle tissue along the way. Don't let yourself get fat and be consistent with that over years. And you'll completely, take your metabolism to another level. So anyway, guys, we're at nearly the 40-minute mark. So I'm gonna wrap it up there. If I didn't get to your question, I apologize. I'm trying to keep these Q&As to, about 30 to 40 minutes in total. So appreciate the support, guys. Appreciate the questions. As always, stay tuned. I'll be continuing to put out content on Instagram, training tips, nutrition, my own training vlogs. The podcast will continue to come out every Sunday with the Q&A, and then every Tuesday with a guest that I have on the show. I've recorded several awesome ones already. So the next 7 weeks or so of the podcast are already recorded, already covered. I'm excited for you guys to listen to that. So just keep helping me grow this thing. Subscribe to the YouTube and stream on Spotify. Follow me on Instagram. The bigger I can kind of grow the base here, the bigger I can grow the audience and the following, the more opportunities it has to, get some sponsorships at the podcast or things like that. And then we can just take the production value higher and get more and, more high profile guests on. And at the end of the day, I just want to put out great content for you guys and just build something special over here. So anyway, guys, thank you for the support. And tune in on Tuesday for the next episode of the Hammer and Chisel Performance Podcast. Catch you later.